In the heart of Stockholm's old town, Gamla stands the magnificent Stor Kyrkan Cathedral. Built in the 13th century, its bell tower has watched over the city for hundreds of years. Every hour, its bells ring out, a sound that has become part of the city's soul. Tourists flock to admire the famous sculpture of St. George and the dragon and the royal pews. But high above, in the bell tower, lives something much, much older. This is the story of a bell ringer who disturbed a 700-year-old resident and learned that some things are best left undisturbed. This is the story of the Stor Kyrkan bell. Eric Lundström was proud to be the new bell ringer. At 35, he was young for the job, but he was skilled and determined. The previous bell ringer, old Gustav, had retired suddenly after 40 years, muttering about strange voices and things in the tower that wanted him gone. The church dismissed it as old age. Eric, a modern, rational man, didn't believe in superstitions. After all, the bells were controlled by a computer now. His job was simply maintenance. His first day was December 1st, the start of Advent. He climbed the 173 cold stone steps to the bell chamber. The space was vast, home to 5 enormous bronze bells hanging from ancient wooden beams. The largest, Storklokken, weighed over 6 tons. Everything seemed perfect. But in a dusty corner, Eric found a small nest made of old rags, straw, and bits of rope. Assuming it was old Gustav's makeshift bed, he cleaned it away, wanting to keep the tower professional and tidy. That first week, the bells rang perfectly. But then, strange things started happening. A wrench would vanish, only to reappear inside one of the bells. He heard scratching and scuttling noises from the rafters, which he dismissed as rats. He set traps, but caught nothing. The sounds continued. One day, his entire lunch bag disappeared from the workbench without a trace. Then the sabotage began. Bolts on the bell mechanisms were loosened. Ropes were mysteriously frayed. The computer settings were altered, causing the bells to ring at 3 in the morning, or not at all. Exhausted from late-night climbs to fix the issues, Eric began to understand why Gustav had retired. But he was stubborn. He decided to sleep in the tower to catch the culprit. One night, he was woken by a low, tuneless humming. It came from the corner where he'd cleared away the nest. He shone his flashlight and froze. There, sitting in the corner, was a small, gray-bearded man in old-fashioned clothes, rebuilding his nest with the very rags Eric had thrown out. He was also using Eric's missing tools and the remains of his lunch bag. The little man looked up, his eyes filled not with fear, but with pure annoyance, like a homeowner confronting a rude guest. Eric's mind reeled. This couldn't be real. He was seeing a Nisse, a creature from folklore. The Nisse ignored him and continued his work. Finally, Eric found his voice and asked who he was. In a voice like creaking wood, the Nisse explained. He had lived in this place since before the church was built, when it was a sacred grove. For 700 years, he had watched over the bells, and for 700 years, the bell ringers had respected him. They left him offerings a share of their meals, tools to borrow. But Eric had destroyed his home, set traps, and treated him like a pest. The Nisse was tired of it. He wanted Eric gone. Eric tried to reason with him, explaining he didn't know. He offered to leave gifts now that he understood. But the Nisse shook his head. It was too late. Eric had been disrespectful. He had to go. When Eric refused, the tower exploded with sound. All 5 bells began to ring at once, a deafening, chaotic clangor that shook the very stones. It wasn't the computer. The Nisse was ringing them himself. When the noise finally stopped, Eric's head pounded. The Nisse stood silently, waiting. Terrified, Eric stumbled down the stairs and into the cold night. Who would possibly believe him? The next day, complaints flooded the church. The priests demanded an explanation. Eric blamed a computer malfunction, but he couldn't bring himself to go back up the tower. For days, the bells were a disaster, ringing at all hours or staying silent. The cathedral, a symbol of Stockholm, was becoming an embarrassment. Finally, under pressure, Eric had no choice. He climbed the stairs again. The Nis was waiting, sitting in his newly built nest, now decorated with Eric's own scarf and work gloves. Eric tried to make peace. He brought offerings of porridge, honey, and coins. He apologized. The Nis looked at the gifts, then pushed them aside. He climbed onto the massive Storklockan bell and began to rock it. The Nis rang it faster and faster. The bell rang loud, and the Nis hopped on to the next bells, giving them a push. He went on with the next bells. The wild sound of all those bells echoed through the streets of Gamla stan and Stockholm, filling the air with an inferno of sound. Slowly at first, then faster and faster, the 6-ton bell swung. The ancient wooden beams groaned, and the whole tower shook. Eric screamed for him to stop, terrified the bell would break free and crash through the church below, killing people. Just as it reached a terrifying height, the Nis stopped. The bell slowed, its momentum dying, until it hung motionless once more. The Nis looked down at Eric. The message was clear. He could bring the bell down anytime he wanted. Leave or next time it falls. Eric understood. He couldn't win. He descended the stairs and went straight to the church office. He resigned, claiming stress and health problems. He tried to warn them about the tower's resident, but they just looked at him with pity and suggested he see a doctor. Eric left Stockholm and never looked back. The church couldn't keep a new bell ringer. 3 quit within days, all reporting missing tools, faulty bells, and the feeling of being watched. In desperation, they called old Gustav and begged him to come back just to train a replacement. Gustav agreed on one condition. He would do things his way. When Gustav climbed the tower, the Nis was waiting. Gustav smiled and greeted him like an old friend. He brought porridge, bread with butter, and a small flask of aquavit. He apologized for the disruption. The Nis accepted the offerings. Together, they worked to maintain the bells, with Gustav treating the ancient creature as a partner. Gustav then trained a new bell ringer, a woman named Ingrid, who understood the old traditions. He introduced her to the Nis, and she learned how to show respect, leaving offerings and working in harmony with the tower's guardian. The Nis accepted her. Since then, the bells of Storkarken have rung perfectly. Tourists hear their beautiful chimes on the hour, never knowing that high above them, a woman and a 700-year-old Nis work together, keeping the ancient rhythms of the city alive. And sometimes, in a different city, Eric Lundström still hears phantom bells, a reminder that some places have residents you can't evict, and some traditions must be honored. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and ring that notification bell for more stories from the shadows in the north. And comment below where in the world you're enjoying this content from.